And we are now ready to start with chapter 2, which is concerned with the chaitasikas, the mental factors. And in fact, even though we've been studying the different types of chittas, but what makes the chittas important, or what gives color or flavor to the chittas, as you might have noticed, are the factors that are associated with it, the mental factors or chaitasikas. The chittas themselves are like, if you remember the simile I gave of the box of chocolate, the chitta itself is like the box, and the chaitasikas are like the different flavored chocolates that go into the box. So if you ask for a box of chocolates and somebody says, he wants a box, and they just give you a plain box, then you wouldn't find that very delightful. When you ask for a box of chocolates, what you really want are the chocolates, which have the different flavors. And so it's through the chaitasikas, the mental factors, that we could understand the chittas. And now, I already mentioned, I think, wow, it seems almost like a month ago, but it was just yesterday I mentioned the 4 defining characteristics of a chaitasika. What are those 4? Common arising, common cessation, common object, base. So the 4 marks of a chaitasika that connect it with the chitta is that all the chaitasikas together, as well as chaitasika and chitta, have a common arising, common cessation, common object, and common base, common physical base. So we see that here, that in the first verse says, Ekupada nirodha cha ekalambana vatuka cheto yuta dvipanyasa dhamma chaitasika mata. The 52 states associated with consciousness that arise and cease together with it, that have the same object and the same base, are known as the mental factors. And so the Theravada tradition, the Theravada Abhidhamma tradition, has enumerated 52 mental factors. It seems that the different Abhidhamma traditions have different numbers of mental factors, and there are sometimes significant differences between them. I mean, a lot of similarities, but sometimes significant differences. So, again, I have to say, I don't take an absolutist conception with regard to the mental factors. But it seems that the early formulators of the Abhidhamma were trying to work out a model of consciousness and the factors associated with consciousness. And so different communities, perhaps in different geographical regions, came to different decisions about what kind of mental states mentioned in the suttas they will incorporate into the Abhidhamma as chaitasikas, and then the different communities went about classifying them in somewhat different ways. And so what we're seeing here is the Theravada version of the chaitasikas. If you have been studying the Sarvastivada Abhidharma, which Venerable Dhammadeep is teaching in New York City on Wednesday nights, then you might get a different presentation of chaitasikas. So you just have to recognize different schools of different Abhidhamma schools went about assigning different Chaitasikas, assigning the status of Chaitasikas to different mental states, and then classifying them in somewhat different ways. Okay, so now we find that the mental factors or Chaitasikas are divided into 4 broad classes. 2 of them are called ethically variable factors. And within the ethical variable factors, there are 2 groups. One are the universals, the other are called pakinika, which means occasionals. So the universals are the mental factors that are present in all states of consciousness, in every citta. The occasionals are present in some, not present in others. But what brings the universals and the occasionals together is that they are called ethically variable states. That means that they are not specifically either unwholesome or wholesome, either unwholesome or beautiful, but they take on the quality, the ethical quality of the citta with which they're associated. They can become unwholesome in an unwholesome citta. In a beautiful citta, they become beautiful. The third set of Chaitasikas are the unwholesome factors, the factors that are only present in unwholesome cittas, and whenever they occur, they are unwholesome. And the fourth group of Chaitasikas are the beautiful factors, those factors that occur in the beautiful cittas. And so the beautiful Chaitasikas can be wholesome, they can be indeterminate when they occur as results, and they can be functional in the functional cittas. So the first group to be taken for consideration is the ethically variable factors, which are 13 in number, and the first set of ethically variable factors are the universals, those factors which are called sabbacitta sadharana, which means common to all states of consciousness. So these are the factors that are always present in any citta, in any state of consciousness. And these are in number 7. So we have the list of them: contact, feeling, perception, volition, one-pointedness, the mental life faculty, and attention. So these 7 mental factors are called universals. Okay, of the 7 universals, 5 are mentioned already in the suttas as constituents of nama. When the Buddha speaks about nama rupa, the material and mental factors that go along with consciousness, he mentions 5 components of nama. So we could understand that those are the 5 universal factors taken over from the suttas. These are contact, feeling, perception, volition, and attention. Then the formulators of the Abhidhamma added 2, one-pointedness and the mental life faculty. Okay, let's go through them, and it's helpful to look at the explanation in the book, since we have some very precise explanations here of what they are. So the first one is, in Pali, it's phassa, which means, or translated as contact. And literally, passa would mean touching. But passa is not physical touching, but it's the act of mental touching, the mind touching the object. In the suttas, contact is explained as the coming together of three things: the sense faculty, the object, and consciousness. And the way I would explain contact, I would explain it as the mind going out through the sense faculty to meet the object. Or sometimes the sense faculty is called the door, the sense door. So it's the mind going out through the sense door to meet the object, or the object coming in through the sense door to meet the mind. So when the mind and object come together through a particular sense door, either a physical sense door or the inner mind door, that meeting of mind and object is contact. And it's explained here that contact is not the mere physical impact of the object on the bodily faculty, because objects can be impinging on a sense faculty, but if we don't turn the attention to it, there's no contact. So we say that contact is the mental factor by which consciousness mentally touches the object that has appeared, thereby initiating the entire cognitive event, initiating that particular citta. Okay, then arising from contact and associated with it, they arise together, but in a way the contact is the condition for the next three chaitasikas. Even in the suttas, feeling, perception, volition. So feeling, Vedana, here doesn't mean emotion, the way we think of, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling so glad or happy. But feeling is simply, we call it the affective mode in which the object is experienced. That is, Vedana means the particular tone or quality of an experience as being either pleasant, painful, or neutral. Then sometimes it's divided as threefold: pleasant, painful, neutral. Sometimes, as we explained last night, as fivefold: joyful, then bodily pleasure, sadness or dejection, and then bodily pain, and then neutral feeling. Okay, so this is feeling. It's the way in which the particular tone of an experience, the tone, the felt tone that the citta derives from its object. Okay, then the third chaitasika amongst the universals is perception. And perception is the mental factor that perceives the qualities of the object. So the most obvious example, the most obvious example of perception would be if I see a particular color, then I distinguish that color. I note something as being blue, being red, being purple, and so on. Of course, perception can operate through all six of the senses, And so we have perceptions of visible forms, perception of sounds, perception of odors, perception of tastes, perception of touch sensations, and the inner perception, perception of mental objects. And perception has the special role of serving as a basis for memory, because it's through perception that we note the distinctive aspect of an object. So when we meet a person for the first time, okay, we see that person's face, and we could say it's perception that distinguishes the facial features of that person. So then if we're walking down a street and we passing numbers of people, then we see somebody and we know, I've seen that person before. Ah, yes, that's who it is. So the recognition occurs because of previous perception, and then the later perception is able to connect the present sensory object with the object of the previous perception. So it's said that the function of perception is to make a sign as a condition for perceiving again that this is the same, or its function is recognizing what has been previously perceived. Okay, now the next mental factor, universal factor, is called in Pali Chaitana, which we translate as volition. And so volition is the mental factor that its most prominent role is in achieving a particular goal or objective. So it's the volitional aspect of conscious experience. Then the commentaries explain that Chaitana organizes its associated mental factors in acting upon the object. And so amongst all of the mental factors, Chaitana, volition, is the one that plays the most important role in creating karma. In the sutta, in one sutta, the Buddha says, it is volition that I call karma. But volition is not always creating karma, because volition or chaitana occurs in every citta, every state of consciousness, not only the karmically creative states of consciousness, but also in the resultant consciousnesses, also in the bare functional states of consciousness. So in those states of consciousness, it's said that the function of volition is to coordinate the other mental factors. And so a commentary compares volition to the conductor of an orchestra who performs his own function and is also has the responsibility for coordinating all the other musicians in the orchestra. So here it uses a different simile. It's like the chief pupil who recites his own lesson and also makes the other pupils recite their lessons. And so when volition works on its object, it sets the associated mental factors to do their own tasks as well. So this is volition. The next is one-pointedness. And this might seem a little bit surprising for one-pointedness to be called a universal mental factor. Because normally we think of one-pointedness to be the particular state that's achieved as the result of the practice of samadhi meditation. But the one-pointedness in samadhi meditation shows the culmination or high point of one-pointedness of mind. But according to the Abhidhamma teachers are looking at the citta through a microscope, we might say. And what they find is that every citta is focused upon its own object. Even when we're completely distracted, when it seems that the mind is just utterly restless, roaming from one object to the next, but in that wild, chaotic stream of thoughts, every citta, every state of mind is focused on its own object. And that focusing on the own object is the one-pointedness in that citta. So what we are doing in the systematic practice, what we're doing in the practice of meditation is trying to ensure that the object remains the same, or that the mind remains on the same object. So in this way, the one-pointedness, which is focused on its object, is building up strength from citta to citta, a kind of cumulative strength. And so even though the mind will wander, whenever we bring it back to the object, then we're strengthening the one-pointedness. And then as one goes on practicing the concentration meditation over a long time, then the mind becomes steadily focused on the object without drifting to other objects. Then we have a strong state of one-pointedness that we call samadhi. But even in the simplest and most primitive types of citta, there's some degree of one-pointedness, and that is this mental factor. So here in the text we say, although this factor comes to prominence in the jhanas, where it functions as a jhana factor, the Abhidhamma teaches that the germ of this capacity for mental unification is present in all types of consciousness, even the most rudimentary, and it there functions as the factor which fixes the mind on its object. Okay, the next mental factor is called the mental life faculty. So the Abhidhamma speaks of two kinds of life faculty. One is the physical life faculty. That is the life faculty which maintains the vitality of the body. And then there is the life faculty that maintains the vitality of the mind. And that factor that vitalizes the associated mental states is the mental life faculty. So it is said to have the characteristic of maintaining the associated states, that is the other mental states, and it has the function of making them occur, because without the mental life faculty, the mental states can't occur. And then the seventh universal mental factor is manasikara, which is translated as attention. And this is the factor which is responsible for turning the mind to the object. So it's said here that attention is the mental factor responsible for the mind's advertence, rather unusual, rare word. Well, let's put it simply, it's the factor responsible for the mind turning to the object. It's the factor by virtue of which the object is made present to consciousness. So to take a coarse example, if there's a sound coming from that, sudden sound coming from that direction, then I wonder, what is that sound? Then I turn my attention to that direction. So then that is a clear manifestation of manasikara. But even when one is continuing to focus on the same object, it's attention which is continually bringing the mind to that object, turning the mind to that object. And so it's said its characteristic is conducting the associated mental states toward the object, and its function is to yoke the associated states to the object. Then it seems that attention seems to be very similar to vitakka, which is initial application of mind. So we have a little note at the bottom of this paragraph where it says manasikara should be distinguished from vitakka. Okay, manasikara turns the other mental states towards the object, while vitakka applies those states to the object. I have to confess that I was, I think, translating a commentary here. Excuse me? Vitakka? No, vitakka is an occasional. We'll see why. But they seem to be very close. And how to distinguish them in actual experience, I have to say, very, very difficult. Hmm? What did you say? Yeah. Well, vitakka is present in many other states besides the jhana. But, I mean, they seem very similar. Okay. Manasikara is the responsible for the mind's turning to the object. Okay, so manasikara is a universal because in order for a citta to occur, the mind has to turn to an object. But it's not in every citta that there'll be a factor that's applying the mind to the object. So that is the task of vitakka. I don't want to take questions at this point till we go through at least all of the ethically variable factors. Okay, so now those are the universal factors present even in the most elementary type of consciousness. Now we come to what are called the occasionals, those factors present in many or some states of consciousness, but not in all. So, the first of these is vitakka, which is here translated initial application. And we already met vitakka in the context of the first jhana. And so here vitakka is defined as the application of the mind to the object. Its characteristic is the directing of the mind onto the object. So it's actually sometimes it's depicted as if it is lifting the mind and putting it onto the object, whereas attention is simply turning the mind to the object. So vitakka seems to have a more forceful function than attention, or a more decisive function. And then it said its function is to strike at and thresh the object. I think that seems to be drawing its meaning from somebody who is practicing to achieve jhana. So he has an object and he's trying to keep the mind continuously on the object. So it's like striking and threshing the object. But it shouldn't have to be depicted as a forceful act on the object. And then it's manifested as the leading of the mind onto the object. So I think we could see the function of vitakka fairly clearly in the case when we are doing a meditation and our task is to keep the mind on the breath, for example. Then we note that the mind has wandered. Then we realize, mind has wandered. Then we take the mind and redirect it to the breath and put the mind back onto the breath. There you can see, I think, vitakka at work. Okay, then vitakka is often coupled with the next occasional factor. This is sustained application, or vichara, which is also a jhana factor. And this is said to have the characteristic of continued pressure on the object in the sense of examining it. But this has to be taken a little bit with some reservation. It's not examining the object in order to discern its distinctive qualities, but it's just examining the object in order to keep the mind steadily focused on the object. So it's said that its function is sustained application of the associated mental phenomena to the object, and it is manifested as the anchoring of those phenomena in the object. I think Neil said earlier that it seems similar to one-pointedness, but I think you could see from this that there is some distinction, that one-pointedness is just the focusing on the object, whatever it is, whereas with vichara, one is, putting some pressure on the object, keeping the mind on the object, looking at the object. And the way I say vitakka and vichara working together, for example, when doing mindfulness of breathing, I say vitakka to be the factor that applies the mind to the breath and that is continually directing the mind onto the breath, whereas vichara is the factor by which one is looking at the breath and also checking on the mind to see that it's kept on the breath. So in that way one could see the two working together. The commentaries illustrate the relationship between vitakka and vichara. They use a number of similes, some of them not too satisfactory, but the one that I like, it's like somebody is washing a dish and one hand is holding the dish and the other hand has the cloth or the towel and is turning around the dish to wipe the water off. So vitakka is like the hand which is holding the dish, and vichara, sustained application, is like the hand that's turning around and drying the dish with the towel. Another illustration that's used is like using a compass to draw a circle. So with the compass, one takes the point and puts the point into the paper, and then with the pencil arm of the compass, one turns it around to draw the circle. And so maybe vitakka is like the point, the arm of the compass with the point that goes into the paper, and then vichara is like the arm of the compass that goes around and draws the circle. Yeah, a third simile that's used is that of striking a gong, and then the sound comes out from the gong. So they say that vitakka is like striking the gong, and then vichara is like the reverberation of the gong that results from the striking.
I'm sorry, I know you said to wait, but I think it's contact. How does contact play with vitakka and vitara? Especially vitara, do we have a continual contact, or is the initial contact?
No, contact is present in every state of consciousness. So contact is the, maybe call it the encounter with the object. So it's present in every state of consciousness. Vitakka and vichara are not always present, but vitakka and vichara are present in more developed states of consciousness only, in which there are more sophisticated functions taking place. And so vitakka will be, again, the factor that is applying the mind to the object, vichara, that which is examining the object.
Could it be vitakka, the attention, contact, and then vitara?
Say again.
Would that make sense? Contact, vitakka, and then vitara. If it's...
They're not a sequence. This is an important point to recognize. They are in a citta, they are all occurring together. All the mental factors are occurring together. In certain cittas, one chaitasika rather than another will become more prominent. And so, for example, if when I sit down, there happens to be a thumbtack on the chair, okay, then painful feeling will become prominent. So there'll be many cittas which are dominated by painful feeling, and then there'll be some, maybe anger will come up because of the painful feeling, but we haven't come into that yet. There'll be painful feeling. Okay, then I wonder, what is that? Then I get up and I look at the chair and I see the thumbtack. Then perception is more prominent. But in all of the cittas with the painful feeling, there was perception, there was volition, there was attention. When I'm looking and recognizing that's a thumbtack, there's also feeling, there's also attention, there's also vitakka, vichara. So they're occurring together. And to distinguish these factors is extremely difficult. I mean, I have to confess, I have difficulty myself distinguishing them in experience. And to illustrate this, there's a simile which is used in, it's a work called The Questions of King Milinda, an early work of Buddhist literature, in which a fictional monk named Nagasena is talking to a Greek king named Milinda, and he tells the king that what the Buddha has accomplished in distinguishing these mental factors was extremely difficult. And he says, it's just as if somebody prepares a bowl of soup, a kind of soup, and he uses black pepper and cumin and basil and what are some other spices you use? A little chili pepper, garlic has a very distinctive flavor. Something with a subtle flavor. Turmeric, okay. Cumin, turmeric, a little chili is a distinctive flavor. Black pepper, some salt, mustard, some oregano. Okay. I'm not asking for recipes. We have enough. Okay, we prepare the soup with these spices. You eat the soup, then somebody says, point out to me what is the flavor contributed by the oregano? What is the flavor contributed by the cumin? What is the flavor coming from the mustard seeds? What is the flavor coming from the basil leaves? Very, very difficult to do because all of these flavors merge together. And so what the Buddha has accomplished by analyzing a state of consciousness into these different mental factors is like distinguishing the different flavors in a soup made with a variety of spices. Okay, the next mental factor is called in Pali Abhidhamma, which is translated decision. And that's, in a way, it's, we don't really have, or at least I don't know, a really precise counterpart in English of Abhidhamma. So decision is just an improvised rendering. So it's said to have the characteristic of conviction. And maybe we see the work of Abhidhamma most clearly when we come to a decision. Am I going to major in physics or chemistry? Am I going to go to this college or that college? Am I going to choose to become this kind of worker or that kind of worker? So when we make a decision, then the function of Abhidhamma is most clear. But Abhidhamma occurs in many, many cittas, even when we just have to decide on the nature of what we are doing, or make choices from moment to moment in our daily life. So it's said to have the characteristic of conviction and the function of not groping in a state of indecision or vacillation. And its manifestation is decisiveness. Then it's compared to a stone pillar owing to unshakable resolve regarding the object. But that seems to apply only when one really makes a very firm decision. But even while I'm sitting here talking, what's going on, say, thousands of times a second are decisions what I'm going to say next, even though I'm not sitting here tongue-tied wondering, what should I say? Should I say this? Should I say that? But it's happening almost automatically. But moment after moment, I'm making decisions about what to say. And while you're sitting there, if you're taking notes, you're making moment-to-moment decisions about what point should I jot down as a note? What do I want to remember? And so on. Okay, so this factor of decision is taking place constantly in our experience, that we're not aware of facing major life-changing decisions. That's when the factor of decision becomes quite conspicuous. Okay, next comes energy, which is the factor that energizes the mind. So it's, actually the explanation is not really all that helpful here. Its characteristic is supporting exertion and marshalling. Its function is to support associated states. Its manifestation is non-collapse. Then what's said next really applies only when one has to assert oneself very vigorously and energetically, that the proximate cause is a sense of urgency or a ground for arousing energy. But energy is present in most states of consciousness, almost all with a few exceptions. And so we could just think of it as the force that energizes a state of consciousness. Okay, then the next occasional factor is called, well, this is one we've encountered already. This is piti, translated here as zest, but I would prefer rapture or delight. And this is seen most clearly as a jhana factor. But usually whenever in daily life, when we feel especially happy, then there's piti in the mind. It doesn't have to be so strong that it's a state of rapture, but if it's your birthday and then your friends, maybe you could see this clearly, they throw a surprise birthday party for you, or your loved one gives you a bunch of flowers or a present for your birthday, then you feel happy. Then there's a high degree of piti in the mind. But whenever one feels happy, joyful, that joy or happiness is a manifestation of piti. And in the jhana, it becomes elevated to such an extent that the mind is exhilarant, bubbling over with this rapture and joy. There just came to mind an image back in the 1960s when the Beatles would have a concert and they come out on stage and the teenage girls in the audience are going, "Oh, wow, wow." That is a super piti. You could just tell those girls, sit down and let that joy at seeing the Beatles quietly bubble through your mind, and I guarantee you 80% of them will achieve jhana. I have to say I don't really like that explanation. But, or let's say it's maybe because people are very fond of experiencing joy. So that's why it's said to be endearing. But I don't think that really helps us to understand it so well. But just think of any time when you're really happy and joyful, and there you see piti. Sampiyayana. Okay, we just have one more to go. This is called chanda, which is desire. And this is not desire as greed or craving, but this is an ethically variable quality. So it can be wholesome, it can be unwholesome. This is desire as desire to act, desire to perform an action, or to achieve some result, desire to achieve a particular state of type of experience. So the Buddha himself actually praised this kind of desire. He said, very often to the monks, he says, bring forth desire to achieve the goal. Excuse me?
contemplated before you act. It's not just a reaction. It's premeditated. In
Not
other words.
necessarily.
No, okay.
Not necessarily. It can be, but not necessarily. So it's said in the notes, it says, this kind of desire must be distinguished from desire in the reprehensible sense, that is, from lobha, greed, or raga, lust, whereas greed and lust are invariably unwholesome. Chanda, as desire, is an ethically variable factor. When it's conjoined, when it's in a wholesome state of consciousness, it's the virtuous desire to achieve a worthy goal. So it's the desire to act, its function is searching for an object, its manifestation is need for an object, and it has the object as its proximate cause. That's not all that helpful, but maybe the simile, it should be regarded as the stretching forth of the hand of the mind towards the object. So if one wants to achieve, for example, deep samadhi, one needs chanda or desire to achieve it. If one wants to gain insight, one needs chanda or desire to achieve it. If one wants to do anything good, even practicing generosity, helping others, again, one has to have some desire. If one doesn't have desire, one will just vegetate in one's seat. Okay, I think that will be it for this afternoon. Maybe we just take a 5-minute stretcher and then we'll have the meditation at 20 after 5. Then the evening again will be a question session. Tomorrow morning, in the first session, I'll try to complete the Chaitasikas, and in the second section of the morning, I want to go through the association of the mental factors. I don't know if I could do the association and combinations all in one session. Maybe the afternoon, I'll have to do the association and then have an open platform for remaining questions in the afternoon. And one more announcement I should make, and that is a number of people have asked me to sign their books, thinking that my signature somehow will impart a mystical power to the book. So we could have a signing session after the last class tomorrow. But if anybody is leaving at the end of today and wants to have the book signed, is there anybody leaving after today? Okay, so everybody, it seems, will be here tomorrow, so that I could sign tomorrow after the last class. And I'll practice tonight reciting the powerful mantras. I'll bless some water and sprinkle some drops of blessed water over it. Okay, let's just take a 5-minute break and then